Hey there, MRA, my Real Africanist. This is Marie Ya Jouf, the Real Africanist, and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if you have been here before, then welcome back. On this channel, we talk about Africa for real, okay? We talk about topics related to African history, African studies, and current African affairs. So, happy Black History Month, day 27, right? It's almost over. And I hope you have been enjoying the commemoration of your ancestors and others who have come before us to pave the way for us to be doing what we are here doing, okay? So, let's get to today's topic. Today's topic is about Africa's economic situation and the constant criticism that I hear African leaders getting as a result of these challenging economic situations, okay? So, I was listening to a video earlier. And the person on the video was really going in on African leaders, right? They were criticizing African leaders about the economies of the countries, about corruption, and really just talking about how Africa will never get ahead, with the strategies that these leaders are using now, and just really talking about the African debt situation, right? And I understand the reality of the economic situation and the debt that African countries are in, right? But for me, it's not, Africa is not the exception to the rule, right? When it comes to economic challenges and debt, right? Actually, they are the rule, right? Because first of all nations have debt. I mean, all of them. I don't think there is a nation out here that escapes the debt trap, right? So all nations have debt. Even even the big boys on the scene, right? I mean, like the US, like the UK, okay, like China. Everything is China. But the US has over $30 trillion worth of debt, right? They call it the deficit, but it's debt. It's debt. It is what it is. Like I say, they play with these words, to make their situation not seem as dire as everybody else's. But again, the United States has over $30 trillion worth of debt. The UK has between like $3 to $4 trillion worth of U.S. debt. Japan has, I think it was somewhere like about $9 trillion worth of debt, and China as well. China has some overwhelming debt. Okay, so like I say, I don't really know. I'm no financial expert. I don't really know how this economic stuff works, right? How these systems work. But what I did learn by doing, research for this video was that, Japan owns billions of dollars of American debt, right? So does China and the UK, Germany, and Belgium. They also own a lot of the U.S. debt, okay? So the issue is really not the debt. because it looks as if everybody has debt, right? And there is some benefit to having this debt and also to owning this debt, okay? But looks like the problem is not the debt alone, right? It looks like the problem is the ratio of the GDP of these countries compared to their national debt, okay? And it also seems, the problem also seems to be with who owns that debt. So I guess it's just like, you know, in your own individual circumstances, okay? If you are paying out more than you are bringing in, basically you're going to be broke. It's just simple as that, okay? And I can relate to that. I understand what broke is, right? Been there. But also too, say if you had, say, a savings account or something, you had money in your savings account and you borrowed from yourself, right, to pay some bills that you needed to pay because you don't have enough money coming in, right? That's one thing, okay? But if you say you borrow money from your boss or your colleague or, you know, your co-workers or, you know, say even, you know, you have credit card debt, that's another thing, okay? Because now you owe somebody else, right? And so it's more important that you pay that debt because that belongs to somebody else, and so they can penalize you for not paying that debt, okay? So that's different from owing yourself, okay? So what I understand is that also some of the countries that I named, some of the big boys, right, they own their own debt. So they I guess borrow from themselves and they own their own debt, but they also own debt within these other countries, okay? So again, like I said, it's not just the debt, it's the GDP, right? And it appears that this GDP calculation has a lot to do with final products or with products that are made inside of the country, you know. And so I know we talk about GDP all the time, right? I talked about it in the last video that I know of a university here in the U.S., and many of them, right, that their annual endowment, their annual budget is basically more than the GDP of a number of African countries, and not only African countries but other developing nations, right? So again, right, it's the GDP as it's compared to the national debt, okay? So like I say, the GDP has a lot to do with the final product and the final these products that leave the country, right? So that are exported from the country. So now I understand more so as to why African countries' GDPs are so low, right? And that is because of the fact that most African countries do not have a large manufacturing sector. Specifically, I would say sub-Saharan. I really don't like to use that term, sub-Saharan Africa, but you know, it's a term that is used to denote the African countries below the Saharan Desert, basically not the northern African countries, right? Because they want to make this separation between the two, okay? That's, like I say, some political identification, okay? So, African countries, again, they don't have a large manufacturing sector. And so they don't make a lot of these final products, okay? And they don't export a lot of final products to other countries, right? You know, there's always a conversation around the raw materials, right, that are being taken exploited in other countries where they make the final products and then sell these products back to African nations or other post-colonial nations, right? Other developing nations. So I used to think that the problem, because I used to hear that the problem was that African countries didn't have the capability of excavating or extracting these natural resources from, from the ground. So these foreign companies and foreign governments had to do that for them, right? But now I'm understanding more is more to it than that, okay? Now that's a possibility because these African countries may not have the equipment to do a lot of that extracting or, what needs to be done. And that didn't happen by happenstance either, right? But because they also then have to import the equipment to do it as well, right? So then that becomes another burden on the budget or the finances of these countries. Okay. So also by knowing this, that allows me to understand why there was such a huge push or a rapid increase in manufacturing in China. Why there was a big push for China to become the manufacturing hub of the world, right? And make no doubt about it, they are, right? They sell stuff to everybody, not just Africa, okay? Because we know ourselves, everything we wear, basically, it comes from China. All of your household products, all this kind of stuff, all of these things, come out of China. So now I understand, why it was so important for this nation to become this manufacturing superpower, okay? But again, the point that I am trying to make is that it is not just Africa, right? It is not just African nations. African nations are not the only ones who find themselves in this position, right? This position of having to import a lot of goods and services from other countries instead of exporting these goods and services, right? We need to turn this situation around, and I think that there are a lot of African leaders that are working towards turning this situation around, right? That's why they are working so hard to build these roads and build these this infrastructure, these bridges, and working on these ports, because that is essential to developing manufacturing companies inside of these countries, right? So right now, they have to take a hit and they have to take criticism from their citizens, because, the citizens are more concerned with the urgent needs of this population, like education, like food, basically, the basic necessities, like clean water, like a good functioning water system, okay, an electric grid, okay. But these things have to, all of this stuff has to be done. So I guess as a politician, you have to make a choice of what has to, what is going to be done first, what is priority, okay? And, I'm on the outside looking in, but once I study all of this kind of stuff, then the picture becomes clearer, right? Like I said, Africa is not the only nation that finds it, continent, but these countries are not the only nations that finds themselves in these positions, right? I think the thing is that Africa the continent, and these particular countries just happens to be the ones with the natural resources that everybody wants, right? And that they will do anything in the world to get, okay? And so that is the huge problem. You know, I also wanted to touch on the fact that we always hear about the corruption of African leaders. You know, we hear about that all the time, and that being the prevalent reason why African countries are in the situation that they are in, right? All of these leaders and their Swiss bank accounts and their lavish poverties in other countries, okay? Just last week, you know, I saw on TV that the U.S. government was returning like $23 million of money that was reportedly taken out of Nigeria by the ex-president and ex-military leader Sani Abacha. And this money was supposedly housed in the UK, but the US found it and, you know, they froze it, right? And now they have decided to repatriate the money back to Nigeria, but with stipulations that the money be used for, you know, roads and bridges and other things, other infrastructural projects inside a particular region of Nigeria, right? Now, Abacha, this former Nigerian president, he died way back in 1998, right? And like I said, I don't know a lot about him. I don't know about his legacy or what he did. You know, I haven't really had time to dwell into that. But I did read a little bit about him, and I read that initially, you know, he did some good things to help the Nigerian economy. You know, he did some he made some good moves towards, you know, building the infrastructure. But then also I read that his, administration was flanked, you know, with bogged down with corruption, you know. But, you know, I'm not sure about that one way or the other, you know, because you are reading these Western narratives, so you really don't know what's true or not. But what I thought that was ironic and what was funny was the report didn't say how long the money had been in the U.S., or how long ago it was when they found this money. But, you know, like I say, the man has been deceased since 1998, right? And I don't know when they found the money, but I know the money wasn't just sitting there, just sitting here in the U.S. Treasury without, you know, drawing any interest or being used for anything. You know, I'm almost 100% sure about that, right? But also what was funny, or what I found so ironic, was that back in 2014, a British independent island country called Jersey. Now, I've never heard of Jersey before. I just found out about that today night, right? But they had discovered that Abacha had $267 million in their country, right? But this money had been laundered through the U.S. banking system, okay? And they found this out, I guess, and I don't know if they held the money or gave the money to the U.S., but anyway, the money was going to be split between the three countries, U.S., Nigeria and Jersey, okay? So for me, that was ironic, right? So if they may have, you know, some sort of seizure or forfeiture law, you know, when somebody, you know, launders money, they may have the right to seize the money or property and keep it, you know. But for me, if they were so concerned about Africa and African development, seems as if all the money would have been returned to Nigeria instead of, you know, keeping it and splitting up between all of the countries, right? If you didn't have anything to do with it, or if you know the money was getting by ill means, then why wouldn't you give the money back to the country from which it was stolen from, right? I mean, we can talk about that, but we talk about Libya. If they, like I said, if they were so concerned about Africa in Libya, the one nation that had no national debt, I mean none whatsoever, right? All its citizens had free health care. They were able to go to school. The government made sure they all had adequate housing, right? All of this took place under the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi, right? And we all know what happened with that, right? And I know that most of us put that tragedy squarely on the shoulders of Obama, right? And rightfully so. I mean, I do too, because it happened under his administration. And, I'm still upset about that. Like, I know a lot of proponents of Gaddafi in Africa are, because Gaddafi did a lot for African countries and he was trying to do more, right? But the U.S. had been gunning for Muammar Gaddafi long before Obama got there, long before Obama was in office. And the tragedy of it is that that call was made to take Muammar Gaddafi out while Obama was in office, right? Like, I know Obama may have had, I don't know if he had the final say or not, because if we take a look back and we think about George Bush and Rumsfeld and Cheney, right? We know that they were his security advisors, but they was feeding him ill information, okay? So I'm quite sure the same thing happened under Obama administration, and Clintons were feeding, or Hillary Clinton was feeding Obama probably distorted information about Gaddafi, right? Because, like I say, they had it in for him for a long time. And speaking of Clinton, somehow she was kind of connected with this situation that I was just talking about in Nigeria, and it was supposed to have been a movie made about that called Clinton Cash, right? So I'm gonna go try to check that out. And they said something about this leader in Nigeria had some kind of connection with the Clintons, and they were profiting from that situation, that oil situation in Nigeria. Okay, but I was also saying about Gaddafi, right? I mean, once they finally convinced Gaddafi to give up his nuclear weapons, then the U.S. went in to Libya, and they took down Gaddafi, right? I mean, like I said, that's the tragedy of the situation. But here you have one stable African country that has no national debt, but you so concerned about justice and about equality and good governance in Africa, but then, like I say, the one country that has all of that, then you go in and take out their leader, right? And like I say, I'm not making excuses for Obama. That's one thing. I actually was a supporter of the Obama administration, right? Because he also did some things that a lot of black people don't know about. And like I said, we'll talk about that another time. Actually, I want to do a video. I want to do a live video about that, discussing Obama's administration, right? But I have to learn how to do the live first, but then we'll do it, okay? But even Obama said that it was the worst, Benghazi was the worst mistake of his administration, why he was in office. So you have to ask yourself, why did he consider it the biggest blunder of his administration? Like I say, not excusing what was done, because of course, it was a tragedy for the African continent and for Libya, right? Libya has yet to recover from that, okay? You even have people who living in Libya, right, who were anti-Gaddafi, now saying that, they wish they had Gaddafi back, right? Because now they see the big picture, and that's how it always unfolds. But what I was saying was that you rarely, you always hear about these African leaders and their corruption, but you rarely hear about the multinational corporations, right? In these African countries that are not paying their fair share of taxes, that are, ciphering out billions and trillions of dollars out of African countries, and like I say, ciphering them through these European, banking systems and these tax shelters in Europe, and specifically, in the UK, right? Some of these multinational companies, right, have been in Africa for a long, long time. These companies are not new, okay? These companies were established during colonization, right, through contracts with these foreign occupying governments, okay? It's not like these contracts were established through African leaders, right? You might hear narratives that say that these contracts were established through African governments, but like I told you last time, they use these trickery with words, right? They may be saying African governments, but they are talking about the African governments that were in place at that time, which were actually European governments, right? These colonial governments, okay? So again, these multinational companies, a lot of them are not new, right? They go way back to the colonial days, right? So again, this financial inequality, this instability, and this debt that we see on the continent, right? A lot of it has its roots in slavery and colonization, the other form of slavery, right? So that's why it is so very important that this conversation around reparation is had, and not only the conversation, but that actually reparations are paid, okay? Because African countries are not the only poor countries, okay, or are not the only developing countries. I don't like to say poor countries because they are not poor countries, but a lot of their citizens are indeed living in poverty, right? We can't deny that, and I'm not going to turn a blind eye into that, right? But if you look at countries like India, like say Mexico, Haiti, Venezuela, Jamaica, and other post-colonial nations, right? It is no coincidence, none whatsoever, that these ex-European colonies, or a lot of their population is living in poverty. These countries are, poor, underfunded countries. I'm sorry. But you have these colonizing countries like Britain, like Belgium, like Australia, and the U.S., right? These countries are wealthy. So come on, this, like I say, this is not a coincidence, okay? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that African leaders should not take responsibility and blame for the corruption and some of the things that happens in the African countries, okay? I know this, and they should, right? The African citizens need to hold their leaders accountable. But, corruption also, that is not just an African problem. That is a huge problem in every country in the world. Don't get it twisted. Wherever you have that type of money, wherever you have politics and leaders who want to throw their power around, or leaders that lust after money and power, you're gonna find some corruption. That's just how it is, right? This happens in all countries, but you just do not hear about it, okay? That's why you have so many these governments in America complaining about these big companies, right, that don't pay hardly any taxes, and they don't pay taxes because a lot of them, they don't tell the truth about how much money they are making, right? They hide their money. I mean, they do all sorts of things. They do the same things that they do in Africa, they do in America and other countries, right? But the thing about it is that our countries, African countries, we suffer more because we are smaller countries, and we've also had this baggage of like I say, slavery and colonization, and also because we have very fragile economies because of what those issues. Okay. And again, I know, like to say, the debt is crippling sometimes, and especially when it comes to these IMF and World Bank loans, right? They are really counterproductive, okay, in our progress as nations. But if I recall right, I think I heard Dr. Arikana say one time, and Dr. Arikana was the AU ambassador to the United States. If you don't know who she is, right? She said that most African countries have never missed a payment on these loans, right? So for me, knowing the magnitude of these loans and how much of these budgets that these repayments, these loan repayments take up, to say that African leaders have never missed payment, right? That for me shows some level of accountability and some level of responsibility. Okay, now does it, like I say, help the average citizen to know that? Probably not, because most people are worried about their everyday life. But however, the truth of the matter is the truth of the matter. Okay, and for things seem like they are getting worse, and they are, because things are getting worse all over the world, with trying to rebound from COVID, and with the wars all over the world, and this thing between Ukraine and Russia, and also this conflict between the U.S. and their allies and China, right? So, yeah, we got a lot going on. So, of course, the people are going to suffer, right? And, the interest rates are being raised on international debt, because of the shape of the economy. So, when you have nations like Africa that are growing and that are just struggling to catch up, from the deficit that they have been in, right? The 400-year deficit, and they're trying to catch up, and keep up with what's going on now. They've had to cut back on basic spending, just to compensate for the increase in debt repayment. Like say this, I remember some months ago, I think that was last year, when I saw that Ghana was building their own factory to produce, I think it was fertilizer, and to be able to produce grain or something to that sort, right? But you never hear about that. And that's a big step, because if Ghana is able to, build their own fertilizer plants, then Ghana can be one of the African countries that can, sell fertilizer to other African countries. So then these African countries won't have to go outside of Africa, to get the fertilizer that they need. So, that's a big step. And those are the small things that we, need to support our leaders in, and, to look at some of those things, some of the things that they are doing, like I say, against, all odds. Okay. So, like I said, I just kind of wanted to touch on that. And, I also wanted to touch on the fact, like in the U.S., okay, taxes are mostly generated by privately owned businesses, by from the citizens paying property tax, employment tax, their income tax, tax on the income that they make. We have all of these kind of taxes, and like I said, I'm not familiar with Africa's tax systems or their structures or how that work, right? But we as Americans, we complain a lot about taxes because we have taxes on everything, but that's how the government generates money, right? And most of the time, the taxes fall short of what of government spending, right? So that's how they incur their debt. Okay, so I'm taking it that that's the same thing that happens in Africa. Okay. However, we complain about that a lot, but a lot of Africans that come to the United States, they are shocked by all the taxes that, that have to be paid, that they have to pay. That's why a lot of us, we feel like you never own anything, because I don't care if you've been paying on your house 50 years, okay? You still have to pay taxes after you pay the house off, okay? You have to pay real estate taxes. You have to pay what they call personal property taxes on your vehicles and other personal property that you own. Now, I don't know if that's the same in all states, because states have different rules some states have different rules from other states. But as far as federal taxes is concerned, on your income, you have to pay taxes, right? So a lot of African people, they come here and they like, wow, you got to pay taxes on everything. And you do. And that's how the government generates a lot of their money, whereas you don't have these tax structures in Africa. So they don't have a way to generate a lot of money that way, right? Like I said, I know they had that you do have to pay some taxes, but not as many, okay? And I was going to say something, but it skipped my mind. But I was going to say something about about that. Oh yeah, and a lot of say the income of African people, they don't make some of our African family, they don't make a lot of money annually, like compared to some of the people in, like I say, these ex-colonizing countries, right? So even if they are paying taxes, they are not paying as much taxes as somebody here in the United States who may be making $60,000 and $70,000, $150,000 a year, and all of that, because you have some of these young peoples, especially, and not just young people, but in some African countries that I've been to, right, they are making less than $100 a month, $150 a month, things like that. And, that's really no money compared to the cost of living. Okay, so all of this, and we need to talk about that too, because all of these companies, these European companies that's supposed to be so heavily investing in Africa and coming over here to give these jobs to these young people, but they not paying them anything, okay? They not paying them. They making all this money, but they not paying them. And again, they making a whole lot of money, and then they just ciphering their money through these U.S. and U.K. banking system, European banking systems, right, and not paying their proper taxes to the government, okay? I know that that's something that the government has been working on, because I remember some years ago they were, talking about that. Like if these companies would just pay the taxes that they owe, then Africa, a lot of these African countries wouldn't have a need for the aid that they get from America and these other European countries. And as a matter of fact, they don't get as much aid as they lead you on to believe that they get. Okay, so that's another thing that we have to keep in mind. Okay, so I was just saying all of that to say, it's a vicious cycle. It's like, what do you do? What do these African leaders and government officials, what do they do? Because you're kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place, right? I know you shouldn't resort to becoming one of those who, take from your country and put them more in debt. But also, as you can see from what I just explained to you, there are other reasons why African countries are struggling. Why they are struggling with development and why they are struggling with their debt, right? So the point really I was just trying to make is that sometimes some of us that criticize so much, we need to just stop acting like it's just Africa and just criticize and when we don't really understand the big picture. I mean, like I always say, I kind of end my videos with this sometimes. It's always more to the story than meets the eye, okay? There's always more to the story than meets the eye. I remember, I'm going to say this and then I'm going to get off here because I've been on here for a while. But I remember one time I was complaining to this African American politician, right, about how I felt that the African American local politicians, don't do anything, or they didn't do anything for black communities, and basically, they were just in it for the money and to, fill their pockets with bribes and things like that. And she kind of, she said something to me. She said, that's true for some of them, but it's not true for all of them. Right? She said, when we go to these state government houses, or, when we go to what we call City Hall and the state legislature and all this stuff, when we go there with legislation to improve conditions within our communities, right? So we have this different legislation that needs to be voted on. She said, when we go to that Capitol or to those state buildings, you have these other ethnic groups and other groups of people who basically these lobbyists and Europeans, they pulling up a lot of these lobbyists or companies, businesses that have a vested interest in legislation that's going to be passed at these state levels, right? She said you have all these people, they coming up in buses to support their local leaders and their local politicians, right? Because they have interest in what will happen, if that legislation passed. She said, but oftentimes, we're up here by ourselves. There's nobody from the black communities who are up here, right, to support us and to lobby for this legislation being passed. She says when it comes to us doing something wrong or the criticism, we hear that all the time. They always right there to say what we don't do. But she said we need them because the power is in the people, right? So when you have a lot of these, when you have a lot of people there supporting you, these other legislators, they tend to listen, or the people who are going to help you get the bills passed, they seem to listen because they want to remain in these positions, right? But when you don't have anybody, they just kind of do whatever they want, or kind of look over you or dismiss you or disregard you, right? And that just made me think, right? Because I had never thought about it that way. That just made me think about things differently, and to know that we also have a part to play in, in our progress, that it's not always just the leaders. So that's a reason why sometimes I am so adamant about that, about looking beyond what you see, to really know what's going on. Okay, so I am going to get out of here, right? I think I went a little longer than I wanted to go, but just remember, I always, a favorite saying of mine is that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at, they change, okay? And I am, also I'm gonna leave a link in the description of this video that featured Barbados Prime Minister Mia Motley. You know, that sister is tough, right? And she kind of broke it down very simply when she was in this interview about, you know, just what I'm saying right now about the debt and about the economic situation of these ex-colonial countries. Okay, so again, I'm signing off, and I hope you got some value from this talk. Right, so if you have a comment, or you know, you have a question, or you want to engage, please leave that the comment or the question down in the comments. Okay, don't forget to like, share the video, again, comment, okay, and also subscribe to my channel. And also don't forget to hit the notification button so that you can be the first one to get notified when I put the next video up. Okay, I am signing off. This is Marie Ya Jouf. And remember, I also have a blog at therealafricanist.com, and you can catch me on Facebook. I haven't been there that much, but at mariajouf.com, and always back here on YouTube at The Real Africanist. Fight the power of one Africa, one family, one love. That's our motto. So I'll talk to you later. Peace.